Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy. Welcome to another Telon Times, the show all about the classic MMORPG, Vanguard, Saga of Heroes. This week I want to talk about dungeons, instances, and referred to in many other MMOs and current MMOs. I can't really call them instances in Vanguard because one of the big things are that there are no loading screens in Vanguard. Now, technically, there are some loading screens, but they play heavily into how the world works. So you'll find mage teleporters and things like that. So obviously, you'll use them, and you'll get a loading screen to teleport to another. And they do have the recall, as you can see down here. Players have recalls now, and they have since added rift stones to various parts of the world, and just each continent and between continents. You can't see it on this regular map. Well, yeah, you can. Here's my Riftway map, and you can see there's a limit in some of them based on the level range of the area and stuff. But they did add fast travel, which adds loading screen. But originally, and it still is the practice today, dungeons are made in the open world. You just find a cave and you start running into it, and it goes down, down, and down. And you just start fighting your way through. Yes, that means there could be other people already down there in the middle of doing some raid progression. It could mean you were down there and then getting towards the boss, and then somebody comes running in, and running around you. It also means that mobs respawn, and sometimes they actually respawn fairly quickly in the dungeon areas. So before you could even finish, most likely mobs will respawn. And so somebody could essentially come in behind you while you're halfway through your dungeon progression, and they could go ahead and start because most of those mobs probably will be respawned. This also means, because it's open world dungeons, it also means that dungeons take on many different forms in Vanguard. Like game like Runes of Magic, World of Warcraft, and what have you, games with instance dungeons are typically sort of like enclosed. So you go into the instance, like you find a cave and then you warp into it, and it's very much sort of an enclosed environment. In Vanguard, you can have dungeons in the open world. You could literally still see the sky, and it's not a separate instance. It's not. It's part of the persistent world. So you could find a floating island and just go to it. And then there's elites and bosses on that dungeon, or on that island, and that's technically a dungeon. That's part of the raid dungeon progression in the game. As far as how many there are, I was fairly impressed. You can find the dungeon finder, or looking for a group tool here, and bring up a list of dungeons, and if you look here, you can see I have a really good long list of dungeons appearing, and this is only dungeons that the game separated for my level range. I'm level 19. As you can see, Kegler's End is 13 to 18. Here's the Hive of the Zehur, 20 to 25, and so on. Some of them are higher, like the Infinium Plateaus, 22 to 25, because some of them are geared. The way they're balanced and created is another thing I really like. There's a wide variety in dungeons. You don't even have to do all the dungeons, because I believe when the game was created some 5 years ago, they put in over 90 dungeons from the get-go, and now the development is ramping up again. We are already getting at least one more high-level dungeon that has like 19 bosses in it. So the dungeons can be vast and be small. The dungeons can be geared around low level, but needing a large group. So like there's dungeons over in near the dwarf starting area, right up in here, Bordenair's Cleft. There's some dungeons up in here. Let me find if I can find a name of one. I don't see the name on the map, but there's a couple up here actually, and they're fairly low level because this is sort of the dwarven race starting area. But even when I like out leveled the mobs by like 4 or 5 levels, I went in with only one other person into the one dungeon, and we kept wiping quite a bit because the mobs were a little bit harder than normal for that level range. They were in larger groups of like 3 and 4, so you'll find some dungeons that are in your level range that maybe match your level exactly, but it's easier because you're only fighting one at a time, or those individual mobs of your level are a little bit weaker than they could be. So there's a lot of variety from dungeon to dungeon that way. Now here's a dungeon that's it's not really in the open world, you have to go into it, but this is a low-level dungeon called Rindle's Storehouse, and I've done this one already before, and as you can see, the mobs on the are really low level. And we're just gonna go in and take a quick peek around as I talk about these. Now this one was really interesting because it's built more like an ongoing building with a bunch of basements and sub-basements, and that's another thing I like. You get a lot of variety in just the appearance of the items or dungeons and how the dungeons are presented. You know, typically you think of a dungeon and it's going to be themed, like there's going to be a fire theme, or you know, like you're going into the caves of waste, and so there's a bunch of toxic, you know, pools everywhere, and which is very neat. I mean, there's some excellent looking dungeons. I'm just trying to highlight that dungeons like Rindle's Storehouse and many other in Vanguard have a lot of uniqueness to them. Very, very unique, because a dungeon could be a house that leads down into a big windy labyrinth-like basement. And because right now we're in the dungeon. As you saw, we kind of came in through the entrance. Now this one's a little more self-explanatory because you saw the entrance, we came in, and so it's very much like an enclosed environment, like a dungeon would be. But again, there will be open world, open air dungeons. Now you can see some of these have dots above their heads. This one on my left has only one circle above it. I call them pips. A lot of people in the community say pips, just means the dots. This one has 2 above it. That denotes its difficulty. It kind of helps regulate more precisely how difficult the mob will be in addition to its level. So both of these could be level 5, but this 2 pip is going to be a little bit harder. It's going to hit a little harder, be tougher to kill. And that's another way to have a little bit more detailed control on exactly how, you know, the difficulty between mobs, between the different mobs of the same level and mobs different levels. In Vanguard, it's always been a slower paced environment. So even when you're fighting stuff that's very easy to kill, as you can see, level 6, and I'm level 19, I still have to hit it a few times, you know? I mean, I just can't come through like Dynasty Warriors, waving a cleaver or my daggers and just constantly keep running. I know in Runes of Magic and World of Warcraft and stuff, if you get tough enough, you can just you never have to stop running. You just never have to slow down. You can just keep hitting an attack button as you're going through all these mobs, and they'll just like fall to the wayside left and right. In Vanguard, everything's slower paced. I do like that, by the way. It allows a player to be more reactive, and for the player to create more chains of reactions and chains of actions within the game, because really when you're out flying through a dungeon, the player really isn't doing much. I mean, you're spamming a button, right? You're just running. That's the actual action. In Vanguard, you have to slow down, and it gives you a chance to create different actions that I think, in my opinion only, are a little bit more meaningful. So I definitely prefer slower based combat. I mean, I don't hate games that are faster paced for that same reason. I mean, that doesn't mean I hate them. I like Runes of Magic. I've always loved Runes of Magic, and on World of Warcraft just fine for the way they are. It's just a different game. So in Vanguard, all these dungeons, as you progress through them, you're going to have to take your time and be methodical, just like out in the real world. I mean, there's plenty of elites and what they call named mobs out in the real world, as well as in the dungeons. For instance, one of the things that the slower pace in Vanguard allows are these chain reactions. Every once in a while, depending on the combos you use, and you can trigger a chain attack that lets you click up on this top chain bar and pull a maneuver off. And it really, to me, it really feels like you are fighting, like you are making the decisions. Like when you're fighting a slower boss, you know, I really feel like I'm having much more of a personal effect on how that enemy's HP bar is going down and why and how fast, you know, and I feel like I have more control over managing my HP and mana bars. Like, I really feel like, oh my goodness, I'm halfway down. I really have to pay attention, and I have to look, and I have to make sure I click these buttons at this certain time to help keep managing my HP and keep it up, and things like that. I think can only come from a slower paced gameplay, slower paced experience. And I don't, again, I said this in my very first Telon Times, I don't think slower gameplay directly leads to boring or less action. I don't think faster directly equates to action. Like, the faster something is, the more action is. Now, the faster it can add to that, but I don't think that's a written in stone equation. I think there's other factors that affect that. So the other thing I wanted to cover is that you don't want to try to go through every single Vanguard dungeon. Let's bring up the dungeon finder thing again here and look. It literally would take so long to go through, and actually on one of my characters I am having fun because I'm a kind of person that does not like treadmill gameplay. I don't want to repeat the dungeons over and over and over to get the better gear to go up, but I do like trying what the game offers. I mean, I would like to see the dungeon at least once or twice, and who knows, maybe if I did like it, I'd want to do it again, and then later on, if friends came along, I'd be like, hey, sure, let's, you know, I'll help you out, I'll do it, because I've been through it, I can help you out, things like that. So, I mean, there is replay value for me in the right time and place. But a person wanting to progress and maybe stay at a fairly steady pace of leveling up and progressing and getting better armor, and to get to end the game or toward the bleeding edge content, probably won't want to hit every single dungeon in Vanguard. As you can see, I could hit Kegler's End, which is 13 to 18. But then, like, if I wanted to, then I could go to the Gardens of Xialu, or Xialu, and which is level 10 to 16, and the armor and stuff like that are probably equivalent. You know, one of these might even be less than another. Or it could be I could get really good armor from both for my level range. The other thing I wanted to mention, my other character that's trying to at least see the inside or see all the dungeons, I'm leveling up. You'll level up so fast you'll out-level them before you can hit them all. So at level 10, everybody gets a skill that turns off level gain or XP gain, and that's what I did on my other character. Like, I hit level 8 and I hit level 8, played a dungeon, and when I hit level 10 and got that skill, I turned it off so I could hit, because there's like 6 or 7 or 8 other dungeons yet to go for my level range around level 10. Now, for the people wanting to steadily progress, you probably don't want to turn level gain off. So what you'll do is you'll probably want to map out with your group or guild, maybe map out a plan ahead of time of what dungeons you would like to hit, maybe based on preference, or maybe you look up armor and rewards and stuff on a website or in the wikis, and decide that way ahead of time, and then you can make your game plan and stick to it. So that's about it for this week. Just wanted to cover the dungeons and how they work, and how I feel because of the pacing and gameplay, how you might want to approach them. And there's just so many. And now that development's ramped up again, there's probably going to be new content coming down the pipeline. I don't know if they're going to be adding, previous content for previous levels. That is, like low-level content per se. But I do know the first content coming is a new city, the City of Brass. I think it's basically a dungeon for high levels, and they did say it's going to have something like 19 bosses in it, and I think they've added new encounter types, like that's going to require unseen strategy and gameplay that hasn't been seen in Vanguard before. So that'll be interesting, but there might be even more low-level dungeon put in later on. I don't know. Personally, I'm not sure it's really needed. I'm not a raider by any means, so I don't feel like I have the best advice for that, or to talk about it. But it would be interesting. But anyways, that's going to do it for this week. If you want to get a hold of me, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Jeremy_Stratton. I'm on Google under Jeremy Stratton. And you can find my blog, justonemore.com, spelled MMORE, for more gaming news and gaming talk. And if you like other shows, I have a user-generated show, brand new one called User, that comes out every Saturday. It's all about user-generated content in different MMOs, and I also have Dungeoneered for EverQuest 2 that features player-made housing and dungeons that comes out every Friday. So if you like this, you might want to check out those as well. And I'll see you guys next week.